This just changed the car market overnight.
All right, Pops, here's the deal. The car market just entered uncharted territory. Here's what's coming next. We've been covering it for a while here, Dad. 25% tariffs on imported automobiles has officially gone into effect. This video, we're going to give you an overview of all things tariffs and what impact they're going to have on car prices. Let's start here, Dad. Pretty much every single vehicle is impacted. Even if it's made in the United States, we have tariffs obviously on imported vehicles, but there's tariffs on all of the components that go into vehicles. And as we know, most vehicles, they're made with parts that come from outside the United States. Those parts travel and cross between borders. So pretty much every vehicle in the United States is going to be impacted in some way, shape, or form by these tariffs. I think that's a fair statement, correct?
Absolutely. There is no 100% American-made car. There are supply chains and parts from all over the world, and those imported parts, come May, will be subjected to tariffs of their own. And then there's parts that might start here in the United States, end up going to Canada to be finished up, brought back into the United States, where they're then sent to Mexico to go be put in an engine, which is then completed and then brought back into the United States for final assembly. And that type of situation is a part that can end up being tariffed 3, 4, 5 different times, because every time it crosses the border, it is subject to a tariff.
So there are 117 vehicles who have final assembly here in the United States and obviously will not be impacted by a 25% import tariff. They're not imported. The final assembly is here in the United States. And the big picture takeaway here is every vehicle is going to be impacted, and these automakers are already starting to respond. Before we talk about how automakers are responding, let's talk about the end of March, Dad. We saw a surge of new car sales. There were some record-setting, best in 4 years type sales numbers for the auto industry. Honestly, it looked a lot like panic buying before these tariffs went into effect. That's at least my assessment of it.
Well, I understand why that would be an assessment that one would make. I know I personally did my car deal in March in order to take advantage of the factory incentives that were available that I think will be going away, and to take advantage of the fact that my car was a pre-tariff vehicle because it was imported into the United States prior to April 3rd. So I think there were a lot of people in that position, and I think there will continue to be people in that position moving forward, because there is a large number of vehicles in dealer inventory that are pre-tariff.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. However, Dad, it's worth noting we were exceedingly busy back at CarEdge.com that last week of March, and websites like Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book, they also saw their traffic spike 30% at the end of March. And again, March was the best sales month for the auto industry for new cars in 4 years. Okay, so even bigger and better than we saw in December and things like that. So there was a massive spike in sales as people were trying to get deals done before these tariffs went into effect. And let's talk a little bit about the potential impact of these post-tariffed vehicles. The numbers are all over the place, Dad. We've already seen some automakers like Ferrari and Ineos increase their prices of vehicles by 10 and 11% respectively. The general consensus is that car prices in the United States will go up between 10 and 15%. However, obviously the import tariff is 25%. So there are some estimates out there and some analysts suggesting that you could see car prices rise anywhere from $2,500 to $20,000. So the expected impact of tariffs on both the parts, supplies, and obviously the vehicles themselves are going to have an upward pressure on car prices. And this comes after many years, like the past 5 years of car price inflation, where the manufacturers have produced more expensive vehicles with more content, more computers, higher MSRPs. So it's a little bit of a 1-2 punch on the affordability front in terms of these vehicles getting more expensive. At least that's the expectation, correct?
I don't know how you can come to any other conclusion if the lower priced vehicles that are in the market are going to be impacted, and they are, because they are imported. Well, that's going to further exacerbate affordability. So even the least expensive cars that are offered for sale in this country are going to have price increases. And if the price increases are only 5%, well, 5% of $22,000 or $23,000, that's well over $1,000 price increase. If people can't afford that stuff prior to tariffs, it's going to make it harder and harder for people to afford those vehicles after the tariffs are imposed.
Now let's talk a little bit how manufacturers are responding to this, Dad. We saw Ford and Stellantis come out with a big promotion saying, hey, you know what? We're American companies, even though Stellantis is not. We're American companies, American brands. We're going to actually offer lower pricing, employee pricing in response to these tariffs that are going to increase prices. We saw Hyundai and Kia's CEO come out and say, hey, we're actually going to not change prices. You're not going to see any price increases from us, at least for the next month. And we've seen other automakers like Volkswagen, for example, and Nissan actually cut back on production. And it's worth mentioning Stellantis has also already fired 1,000 temporary workers and shut down some of their production lines for an expected multiple week stay because they don't want to be producing any more vehicles that are going to incur those tariffs. So let's talk a little bit about that situation, how the manufacturers are responding. And you brought it up earlier. There's a significant amount of inventory that is already in the United States sitting latent, pre-tariff inventory. The story you and I were telling at the beginning of this year before the tariff news was how automakers and dealers were actually sitting on a surplus of inventory. Yes. So help us understand how and why the manufacturers are responding the way that they are.
Well, suddenly that surplus of inventory just became more valuable. And the reason it became more valuable is it's probably anywhere from 5 to 20% less expensive than the replacement vehicles will be. So dealers will be able to sell down their existing inventory. My suspicion is that they will do it by saying, hey, our replacement cost is going up. MSRP is going to be a hell of a deal for you today. And we won't see the type of discounts that we had been seeing. And when it comes to employee pricing at Stellantis or Ford, what we're going to find out is it's really pretty much an either or situation. The incentives that these manufacturers were using pre-tariff, or you be able to use the employee pricing, and when everything is all said and done, they both probably equal each other out, cancel each other out. So you're still going to end up paying the same as you would have. But neither of these manufacturers are price guaranteeing their vehicles. Stellantis, this program expires April 30th. Ford's program expires June 2nd. So it's pretty much, let's wait and see where we're at so we can determine what our pricing will be moving forward.
That's what's been so interesting about this, to your point around incentives. We've seen incentives vanish from Ford and Stellantis in response to obviously offering A-plan pricing over at Ford, employee pricing there, and employee pricing over at Stellantis. So to your point, you're kind of getting the same outcome. And I think in some cases, Dad, you're actually potentially getting a worse outcome. Employee pricing is not the best deal that you can possibly get on some of these vehicles that are so dramatically oversupply. So you really need to be thoughtful as a consumer and not get caught up in the marketing of this. Obviously, back on CarEdge.com, we can coach you through how to do that. You could make a case that this is actually beneficial for these automakers to try and get their inventory situation, their inventory house in order. So it's a fascinating parallel between what we saw a few years ago with chip shortage, then oversupply, then UAW strikes, and now obviously the situation we're in where there's been massive oversupply of new car inventory. And again, some production lines going down because they don't want to import these vehicles with the tariffs. They want to wait and see, and hopefully they'll just go away. So let's touch on what's going to happen next. Obviously, we saw some panic buying and some car price purchase spikes at the end of March. April, I think you and I both anticipate new car sales to stay really, really strong. Used car sales, we anticipate seeing stay strong as well. It's maybe by summertime, Dad, that we really start to see higher prices, even fewer incentives, and obviously the impacts of production slowdowns. I will say on the used car side, now's a good time to be thinking about selling your car, but it's actually going to keep going up in value because used car prices will continue to go up in value as well. So that's kind of the look ahead, right? New car prices will go up by the summertime. Used car prices are kind of already going up. Maybe wait and see, but also maybe strike while the iron's hot before these prices go sky high. What's your take?
We are definitely seeing used car values spiking at the auctions. We know that's happening. Dealers are trying to stock up on inventory now prior to the new prices when the tariffs do impact the incoming vehicles. So we're definitely going to see higher prices for used cars. Short term, new cars, what is in inventory is pre-tariff for most part, and so it shouldn't impact the pricing. So I would think that dealers will be selling down those inventories. Customers will be looking to buy that inventory. So April and May should be strong months, new car sales wise. Starting June, I think you'll start seeing those price increases on new cars. And that'll just exacerbate the affordability issue that we've had for the last 4 years.
Worth mentioning, back on CarEdge.com/buy, we have tariff and no tariff alerts on all vehicles on the car search. So if a vehicle is imported after the date that tariffs went into effect, April 3rd, it'll show up with a tariff alert, and it alerts you to double check the price history of that vehicle. And if the vehicle was brought in before April 3rd, or obviously was had final assembly here in the United States, it will show up with a no tariff alert. Use that information to your advantage as you're navigating this complex situation. Pops, thanks for your time as always. And obviously, we'll continue to make videos on this subject because it's very, very important.
We will keep our eyes on this ball. We promise not to focus on anything else at the moment.